I think that's a good point, because the one thing that I think a lot of fashion designers really don't think about is the supply chain itself. So if you're an international fashion designer and you have a piece of clothing that you make somewhere in Europe, and somebody in the United States wants to buy that piece of clothing, now you got to think of import, export. You got to think of the taxes on top of that. You have to think of if you can actually legally even ship it over. Then you have to think of how you package it, if it's going to even get there. And then once it gets there, is it even the right fit? So there's a lot of, I think, problems, but there's a lot of opportunities in that space, because it is such a traditional industry. It's been around for a long time. That's why I do see that the same problems are reoccurring, because it has been a PR industry. It has been this huge push. But now it's slowly, I mean, not necessarily high-end fashion designers, but just, everyday fashion designers, very like low-end, just making, not necessarily fast fashion, but just making clothing pieces. A lot of people are using, boutique stuff like Etsy. They're using Shopify. So they're at least kind of creating an e-commerce presence. But I really don't see that on the high-end luxury side.
Yeah, so on the high-end luxury side, it's really hard to establish yourself as a brand in high-end luxury. And usually you're doing a lot more community endorsements than trying to sell retail initially. So there's a lot of issues that also happen when you're doing things on Etsy or looking to just establish a fashion company in that manner, because there's also a lot of waste that goes into the fashion industry. And although it's good that we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are getting into fashion, creating these fashion brands, I also think it's really important that we're mindful of where we're getting our fabrics and our resources and how those fabrics are being created, because right now we're dealing with the whole issue of fast fashion and the fact that the fashion world is the largest polluter to waste in the entire industries of industries other than oil. And some people may not know that actually high-end designers rather burn their clothes in piles of clothing than sell it at a discount to a consumer, because they don't want to lose the reputation of their brand that they have of high quality. And sometimes consumers do, think of pricing and think of quality, and there is in that marketing a pricing strategy aspect to marketing in itself. But one thing that's really important for all people looking to get into fashion or starting their own fashion is really to be new advocates of change, of sustainable fashion, and finding ways to whether design their designs with sustainable fabrics and recyclable fabrics, because nowadays sustainability can mean just fair wages. And that's getting thrown a lot, and I've seen it in a lot of manufacturing plants abroad especially. And there's only very few that actually turn recycled bottles into fabrics and weaved clothing apparel that you can use. And maybe some of them, and not maybe, but actually some of them don't even create the clothing. They just create the fabric to be used to create clothing again. And I think it's really important we become really aware of that and start using those type of suppliers.
I agree.